Let's imagine you're hiring someone for a position at your company. You send out job postings, you collect resumes, pick the best ones, and then arrange interviews with multiple candidates. Now, most of the candidates are okay, but one of them clearly stands out above the others. The problem is, you notice based on their conversation that they used to work for a company that did you wrong on a business deal years ago. So, without thinking much about it, you end up going with another candidate. This is the Horns effect. Welcome to Stock Stories. All right. Welcome to Stock Stories, the show where we decode the business behind the stock. Hi, I'm Alex Mason, your stock storyteller, and my wife and I went from not knowing anything about investing to becoming financially independent by 30 years old. And my goal is to empower you with the skills that you need to invest successfully in the stock market. We talk about companies, we talk about the S&P 500. We're going through the entire S&P, and we're also talking about mental models. Now, today, we're going to be talking about a mental model. So if you're ready, let's get into today's episode. Okay, first things first. On this show, we talk about not only companies and stocks, but also mental models too. Now, why do we do that? Well, a mental model is a thought experiment. It's some kind of framework for how we can think about different situations or problems. And they apply to many areas of life. And by the end of this episode, we're going to explore how today's mental model applies to investing in the stock market. Okay, first we have to define the Horns effect. The basic definition is that this is a mental model where a negative impression of a person, a company, or product influences the mind to automatically associate other negative things with that person, company, or product. Now, if you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about the halo effect, and the halo effect is basically the opposite of the Horns effect. So instead of associating something positive with a person or some kind of company or product, we're associating something negative with them. In the example of the job interviews that I gave a minute ago, you ended up not selecting the best candidate because of a personal bias against the company that they worked for. Now, subconsciously, it's easy to make an assumption because that company did something negative to you in the past. So, well, this candidate, right? If the company did something bad and the person's coming from that company, you automatically associate that that person is going to be equally as negative in the context of your life. It might not be logical, but that's how our brains work. We associate negative things with other negative things. Our brains are constantly looking for patterns. That's just what they do. Now, speaking of patterns, Google's algorithm is always looking for patterns. So if you could tap that like button real quick, if you're getting value out of this episode, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Let's discuss now how this mental model fits within the context of investing in the stock market. Now, one thing you'll notice about the stock market is that companies with the same industry or sector, they tend to follow similar patterns as far as stock performance. Now, let me give you an example. For example, energy companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, they tend to move up and down by similar amounts on the same day. And this is true if you look at other companies. For example, look at large technology companies like Apple, Meta Platforms, and Amazon. Usually, when one of them is having an up day, they're all having an up day. And the opposite is also true. If they're having a down day, the other ones are having a down day also. And it doesn't always happen like this, but usually it does. Now, people might fear a general broad downturn in a particular sector because of something that's event driven. For example, right now I'm recording this in late February 2022. There's a lot of growth stocks that are really getting hit hard because of inflation and because of the Federal Reserve in America indicating that they're going to raise interest rates. So when rates rise, growth stocks tend to fall because investors become more interested in bonds or other types of assets that are considered quote unquote safer. And also, they like dividend paying stocks. Dividend paying stocks have been doing great right now. But this search for yield becomes more important for many investors than the search for growth especially if valuations are really high. Okay, so how are we supposed to take advantage of this information as investors? Well, the thing is, businesses are not created equal and they don't operate with an equal amount of strengths and weaknesses, even if they're in the same sector and even if their stock prices fall by similar amounts. So, because of the Horns effect, investors will look at a perfectly good stock and decide to sell it because the general industry is selling off at that moment. It kind of gets carried along with the tide, even though it's a perfectly good business. Now, this is the time to do individual company analysis, which is something that we do here on this show, because we want to separate the legitimate opportunities in the stock market from the ones that we should pass on. So we can look past the horns effect and think more objectively about the business we're interested in investing in. So this is really important for us as investors. Now I want you to think about it. What other companies do you see making use of the horns effect? Let me know in the comments below. Think about which companies are falling just because other companies are falling and they don't really deserve the drop in price. What do you think about that? And also, if you're hungry for more, I've created over 200 free episodes of this show on many different companies and mental models. So click the link in the description to check that out. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.